Okay, ready? All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Brighton Area Schools Board of Education meeting. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Ms. Ackerman, roll call, please.
Mr. Storm,
Present.
Dr. Krebs. Here. Ms. Reed. Here. Mr. Conley.
Here.
Mrs. Marks. Here. Mr. Trombley.
Yep.
Mr. Myers.
Here. All right, that moves us to the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion? Moved by Mr. Trombley. Supported by Dr. Krebs. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? That passes 7-0. That moves us to the called.
Actually, I apologize.
I'm sorry.
I didn't get the chance to jump in there. The administration has requested that we add something to the agenda tonight for the hiring of administrative staff, and I would amend the agenda to do so.
Support. Where is the, I don't know if I flipped mine the wrong way. I saw it in the email that was sent out.
It's on the top, wasn't it? Yep. It's in there.
There it is. Thank you.
So we have a motion to amend the agenda to add an item for hiring the assistant superintendent for
For action, please.
for action. And we have a second by Mr. Conley. Any further discussion?
Today, there's an interview process took place at the meeting after the finance. HR. Thank you. And group of people from the district were there, from employees to citizens in a way, some of the folks that are involved with the schools. And questions were asked of the candidate, and I think everybody on the board has a copy of his resume, I assume. Has a strong resume in his prior industry in the insurance world. And then he has 3 years, I think is correct, about 3 years in public school business. And he's looking for what I thought the right reasons and coming to our district, and was a opportunity for himself to grow with a good program. And so I would support the idea that we would hire him. So leave it at that and bring it forward.
Any further discussion? Just procedurally, we can do it one of two ways. We can actually not formally amend the agenda and just add it when we get to the human resources report, add it to that report and approve that report with him added to it, or we can do it as a separate line item for action. The pending motion is as a separate line item for action, which I'm fine. I'm not fine either way. So
I would support leaving it as a separate item, because I think that's how we normally deal with
Okay.
these positions.
and so we'll add that as it would be a proposed B. I'm sorry. Yeah, proposed B under for action.
Yes.
Well, we've got it, it's in the for action, for action, yeah. So this would be proposed as item B for action, the hiring of assistant superintendent for finance. Okay, any further discussion?
One question, Roger.
Sure.
So on a couple items that we want to bring forward for board consensus, what point in the agenda would we talk about that?
The items that you and I discussed, Mr. Connolly, I would suggest we can add them into the work session. They aren't topics, as I understand it, for which we would need formal action.
Okay.
So we can add them within the board work session.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Okay, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving the agenda as under the amended, signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? That passes 7-0. All right, that moves us to the call to the public portion of our agenda. If anyone would like to address the board, this is your opportunity to do so. Our protocol is to fill out a card at the rear of the room with your name, and there's particular information that's requested that you identify. And then you will have 3 minutes to address the board. Is there does anyone fill out a card? Anyone wishing to address the board in the call to the public? All right. Then that closes the call to the public and moves us into the next portion of our agenda, item 6, closed session.
I move that this board go into closed session pursuant to Section 8H of the Open Meetings Act to review confidential written attorney-client communication.
All right, so we have a motion by Ms. Marks. Do we have a second?
Second?
Second by Ms. Reed. Ms. Ackermite, roll call vote, please.
Dr. Krebs?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Storm?
Yes.
Mrs. Marks?
Yes.
Mr. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Trombley?
Yes.
Mr. Myers?
Yes, that passes 7-0. All right, so we will be going into closed session for a brief period of time. We will actually be leaving the room, so you're all welcome to stay here. When we have completed the closed session, we will return and resume our meeting. So we will be recessed for a few moments.
You guys want to take a walk through my car? I should my car. No.
Yeah. All right.
It's usually about a half hour.
Oh my goodness, why don't they do that like at a different time, like at the end? At the end, or before.
I don't know, that's just.
Moved around a little bit. Yeah. We're gonna make it done, I think.
Yeah, well. Okay. All right, we are back in open session. And at this time, I would actually make a motion to amend the agenda to add a new item A under for action to give the superintendent authorization to resolve a claim. So that my motion would be to amend the agenda to add a new item A, then human resources report would be B, and the assistant superintendent for finance would be C.
Support. Second.
All right, got support by Mr. Conley. All those in favor of amending the agenda signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? That passes 7-0. All right, so that now moves us into the for action portion of our agenda, and we now are at the new item A.
So I'd like to make a motion to give the superintendent the authority to resolve the claim by Mr. Gallus consistent with the request of his attorney.
Support.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Marks, support by Ms. Reed. All right, all those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? That passes 7-0. All right, that moves us to the new item B, the Human Resources Report. Dr. Outlaw.
Yes, tonight, in our human resource report, I will be presenting 2 teachers for hire. First is Melanie McGinty, would be a kindergarten teacher at Horning Elementary School. This position is open because of our high enrollment at the kindergarten level. We're doing very well there, but we've added 2 sections this school year. So Melanie McGinty. And our second hire is Carrie Curry for Scranton Middle School, science teacher, comes to us from the Howell School District. And she will be teaching 7th grade or 8th grade science.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the Human Resources Report as presented? Moved by Dr. Krebs,
Support.
support by Ms. Marks. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? That passes 7-0. And welcome to McGinty and Curry, and we look forward to the education that you will be providing to our children. All right, that brings us now to item C, the Assistant Superintendent for Finance position, Dr. Outlaw.
Okay, so I'm excited to be presenting a candidate for our Chief Financial Officer for the Brighton area schools tonight. With the board's support, we employed the services of Hiring Solutions LLC, which is an executive search firm, to assist us with this. They contacted people throughout the state on this, did recruiting. They presented us with 5 finalists that we screened. And we had a committee interview earlier today where we had 15 people on that committee, including people internally from different positions, as well as a number of parents. And we had Mr. Conley from the school board, as he's talked about. And tonight I am pleased to be nominating or requesting your approval for David Jones to be joining this district. Let me give you a little bit of his background. I was a graduate of Northern Illinois University. He spent 17 years as CFO of a healthcare organization. At the end, it was a $500 million organization owned by Ascension Health that had merged with Ascension Health. Left that, and in his later years has moved into the school setting. For the past 3 years has been the Chief Financial Officer for the Taylor School District. We vetted him today, and I've shared some comments that came from the committee, but obviously there were comments about his skill set and his background and his experience, but also a significant number of comments about his personality, his commitment to working and growing team members, as well as serving a district. His why for working with schools was really important. Really wants to do something, wants to give back. And so that was something that really shined. So what other questions do you have about Mr. Jones?
I just have a quick comment. I'm glad to see that the process went well, Dr. Outlaw. And I saw from the written correspondence you shared with the board that there were upwards of 100 applicants, if I read the note correctly.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number. I'd have to confirm the exact number overall.
Approximately, I think in your email update you sent to the board, if memory serves, and again, I'm not holding you to the exact number, but I
I think
thought
they made contacts with
100 plus people.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Lots of interest.
So a lot of the people they contacted did not apply for the position, but we definitely had the right person was interested. So
Super.
Any other discussion? Well, I'm very appreciative of the efforts that were undertaken to cast a wide net. As a follow-up to Mr. Storm's comment, find what appears to be the right person for this position. He has a very impressive resume. I know there's been discussion at the board table about finding someone that does have a breadth of experience beyond just public education. He clearly has extensive experience in the private sector, as well as obviously the experience he's had most recently in that same capacity in the public education context. So I hopefully, bringing both of those backgrounds into the fold will serve us well. He, as I said, on paper, he's got a very impressive resume. Mr. Connolly, thank you for sitting in on the interview process. And I look forward to Mr. Jones joining our team and being a very productive member of the cabinet.
I would say, Roger, too, in it, that he's got 3 years' experience in the business of education. He hasn't run off. So, he knows what he's getting into. He knows that it has some complexity, but also the important thing is the students. And he did represent that in his interview, that he knew that the target was to service the students. And I think that's the number one thing, and that we can work with anybody if they've got that attitude. So should have worked out just great.
Well, I've got a question. Was the hiring company or the headhunting firm, was that based on a fixed fee or was that part of his salary, based on his salary?
It's a percentage of salary,
Percentage of salary? And what percentage was that?
10%.
What's that?
10.
10%? Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? That passes 7-0. And congratulations to Mr. Jones, and we look forward to meeting him soon. All right. That concludes the for action portion of our agenda and move. Sure. Oh, my apologies.
Yeah, let me catch up.
You
Did
just
we?
said she does such a good job with her.
Well, you know what? I didn't see my face. Did we have somebody give the motion and support it? 'Cause I must have missed
Well,
it.
if we,
I
to make
know,
sure that
but that's what I'm saying.
You did.
Okay.
well, to be safe, let's have another
I
motion.
think Ms. Marks made the motion and then I supported it. Is that how we did this?
That was the amendment to the agenda.
Okay.
That sounds correct.
If it was, yep, that's okay. I'm sorry, I missed it.
Let's read.
All right, so let's go ahead and have another motion. We don't want to have an issue with the hiring of somebody of this caliber. So do we have a motion to approve the hiring of Mr. Jones?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Marks, supported by Ms. Reed. All right, all those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any nays? That passes 7-0 for sure. All right, that concludes our for action portion of the agenda and moves us into the board work session. We initially have 3 topics that have been previously identified to be discussed at this workshop this evening. They have at the board table for each of the board members. The number one item being the continued discussion of the proposed changes to policies 3105 and 2302. So we will tackle that one first. And then second item is the contingency allocation that in terms of the ongoing bond work and the prioritization of where we spend those remaining contingency dollars. And then the third being the facility planning and long-range planning for sinking fund. And then time permitting as well, we've got a couple of add-on items from the finance committee meeting from earlier yesterday, I guess it was, to address. So without further ado, the first item will be the policies 3105 and 2302.
Quick question. Are we still on for the 9 o'clock, the 2 hours that we blocked out for today?
That would be preferable?
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So as we're all familiar with the origin of these proposed changes, and there have been various meetings that have taken place among either the policy committee or individual board members regarding potential changes to these policies. the latest of which, as I understand it, Dr. Outlaw, there basically are three different sets of the policies. The first being what came out of the policy committee recommendation. The second set of those policy revisions were a product of changes that I drafted after meeting with Mr. Conley that was presented at a previous board meeting. And then the third set, as I understand it, was a sort of a, I don't know if compromise is the right word, but a sort of a blended alternative between the first two versions, and which I understand was drafted by Dr. Outlaw for consideration. So we have the three different versions. I mean, obviously, there can be even further discussion as far as any changes to those versions, but the hope would be that we come to a consensus, or at least get to a point where we can move forward with adopting one version of these two policies at the next meeting, and getting us together and working through whatever objections we may have to one or more of the various drafts is what we're here to do tonight. So I don't know who wants to lead off, if anybody.
I can just share a quick comment.
Sure.
So thank you, Roger, for facilitating this on the agenda this evening. I sit on for those in the public who are not aware, I sit on the policy committee with Ms. Marks and Ms. Reed. And this is something that we have reviewed as a policy committee. I had suggested, I think it was at our last policy committee meeting, or was it the one prior? The one prior, because I was remote the last time, to invite John and Bill to come in and provide input on what Roger just shared with the with the board this evening in the meeting. And it was suggested that we achieve the dialogue, the discussion at the board table in a public board meeting to just save that kind of coordination that would be involved in bringing them into our policy committee due to the requirements around the Open Meetings Act. Even though we would be able to satisfy those requirements, we just felt, the board felt, Dr. Outlaw felt that the dialogue would be best served for the public in this forum. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. Is that a fair summary?
Yes. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in. So I appreciate the work that Dr. Outlaw put into the latest version, and thank you, Mr. Conley, for your comments there. On the third version of 3105, that is page 14. That leaves intact most of the work that the committee had done in order to improve the clarity around who was required to get what types of background checks in order to have access to our buildings, because that was the origin of the discussion for the changes to that particular policy. So I certainly would support the latest version of 3105, because I think that accomplishes what the board has been trying to do since January. Hopefully we'll finally get that done. For the changes recommended to 2302 in subsection 18, which I think is the one that we've had the most discussion about, the compromise proposal there, I think, gets at most of what we had discussed at the committee level. The main goal was to try and make sure that it was clear that our board members needed to go through the same process that other folks with badge access to buildings needed to go through in order to have those badges. So that part of our process and our discussions that I think most of the board had shared previously has been accomplished. So I would certainly support that. I am disappointed that there's nothing left that requires board members to check in at the front desk when we arrive at buildings the way other visitors do, because I think that's an important part of our responsibility. We should not be wandering halls without checking in any more than any other member of the district should be wandering halls and buildings that we are not actually assigned to. So I would prefer to see some additional changes to subsection 18 that would have us follow the same procedures for visitor check-in that other visitors to the buildings would have to do during normal school hours, because I think that would be appropriate from a safety standpoint, if nothing else, so that the folks that are responsible for safety and security in our buildings know who is there when we're there.
I have a, with the three different versions, so going back to 14, that second paragraph under visitors puts Board of Education as a visitor, which does indicate that we would check in as Board of Education members to the front, correct? Or am I reading it incorrectly?
My understanding was that that was coming out. Is
Oh,
that
okay, I was reading the highlighted part as staying in, including school board members. So that is an eliminated line.
Dr. Outlaw?
So I added that. The green is what I added.
Okay.
And then if it had a strike through, I took it out.
Okay, so this version, 14, would indicate a person, including school board members, visiting a school building during instructional hours must first report to the building's main office, right?
Yes, actually, that was written in there before. So, yeah.
That's, I mean, we have had
that is
it
new.
in other, but we've moved school board from visitor to frequent visitor to, so I'm just trying to clarify where we would fall.
And I appreciate that, because my understanding was that the point of this latest version was to remove all reference to the board from the visitors section. And so the board would only be governed by the board code of conduct, which is 2302. So we would not have that check-in.
My personal preference is that we have to check in when we enter a building.
I would agree.
Well, I think everybody agrees, but I think on that, in the resolve here is that's not taken out, right? Dr. Outlaw, it's in there. It says. includes-
Whatever you want. I mean, this is just to try to keep the ball rolling.
Right.
So the point though would be, let's just say we have a situation that the board member can't check in, then he can call in and go around the back and just tell him that he's there. I think that the check-in is to go in and identify yourself. Basically, they know you're there and you walk through the office. I don't think that's a problem with anybody here, is it? To check in at the main office?
But correct me if I'm wrong, in the executive committee, wasn't the discussion was to eliminate the board from that section, or the reference to the board in that section? Isn't that what was discussed when we talked about what was on the agenda for tonight?
I think we have the three different versions.
Right, but the one version had the portion of the board, specifically the board, eliminated from it. Now all of a sudden it's back in again?
No, so the second version that was the second version being that reflects the changes that I drafted after meeting with Mr. Conley. It did remove the inclusion of a reference to board members in the visitor section.
Right.
But it added at the very end of policy, the 3105, it added the paragraph that said, school board members are state officers who carry out the state's education obligations at a local level. In that capacity, a school board member has the right and not the obligation to receive an ID access badge, blah, blah, blah. A school board member who receives an ID access badge must comply with all policies applicable to ID access badges. So it did provide for removing it as a visitor, but within the language of the, it still says that a person, it took out the reference of identifying as a visitor, but it still had, this is on page 8, which is this is still the version that I had drafted with Mr. Conley. It still had a person, including school board members visiting a school building during instructional hours must first report to the building's main office. So all three versions have had the obligation to check in. It's just a matter of where they were, they were included, or I think the biggest difference between what is the draft that I had prepared and the third version, the compromise version, was Mr. Conley trying to adjust Mr. Conley's objection that we are defined as just a visitor. And that's why I added that separate paragraph that comes right from the MASB. That's where that last paragraph comes from, in terms of what a school board member is. And so it was a way to try to eliminate the characterization of a board member as a visitor, but still capture the check-in process. That's basically what that version.
So if I can make, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's done.
No, I'm just acknowledging, I remember when we reviewed that body of work in the policy committee meeting, and I thought it was well written, Roger. I shared that with the policy committee.
To make this a little bit more consistent then with what we've discussed here and with what was discussed at the executive committee, I'm still starting from the version that starts on page 14, because I think that's the one that's got the most consensus so far. I would say in section A2 on visitors, the green section that we've been talking about, I would delete that so that we're back to no reference to the school board in this section 3105. And then moving over into 2302, at the end of what's written there for section 18, we just add a comma and then say and will follow visitor check-in procedures when visiting a school building during instructional hours as described in section 3105.
Well, why did, Alicia, can I ask you on number 2, why does it say including school board members?
I think that's part of what we had drafted originally in order to
Who's
bring
we?
the policy committee.
Originally, and you both correct me if I'm wrong, when we first started this, it feels like a lot of versions ago. We had moved school board members to frequent visitor along with people like PTO volunteers because we're in the schools more often than just a visitor that may come once or twice during the year. So the idea was that we had slightly different expectations for people that are regularly in the schools that are not employees, including school board members, still requiring them to check in, but not the visitor. It had a lot to do with the background check that they were
So
going
then if
through.
there's a catastrophic incident, knock on wood, there never is, but if there is, PTO members don't necessarily take a rap for it, it's the school board, right? And we're still considered as equal to PTO members?
I think it was just trying to define the frequency in which you're entering a building. It wasn't
It was just the
equivocating
check-in,
for,
yeah.
it was really just the process of checking in.
That was the original goal.
So why is that highlighted now then in green?
Because it got added in from the original version. Like the original version, which was 2, just said a person visiting a school building during instructional hours. And then we had under frequent visitors C, for example, Board of Education members, PTO volunteers, et cetera. So we had a different,
So the policy committee was
Definition.
the one that put in including school board members?
No, that's the
No,
second draft that
that
was
came
from John and
from-
Roger added that.
correct.
Wait a minute, is it from John, is it from Dr. Outlaw, who's it from Roger? Please.
So
They're all right there, so it shows up on the second draft.
What page is that?
So going back to, as a kind of,
That's
to
page 8.
to piggyback on what Ms. Marks just mentioned. So when I met with Mr. Conley, there were, on this issue, there were basically 3 changes. One was on page 9, where this was the frequent visitors, where it defined a frequent visitor as a Board of Education member, PTO volunteer. That, in the draft that I prepared, that was stricken, so it didn't.
Board of Education members.
Right, Board of Education members was stricken.
And that's what
Right.
that reflects there.
And that's what that reflects there. I then added the language that I just read earlier, the D, which has the reference to who school board members are.
Right.
But then added to the 3105A2, which was page 8. That's where then including school board members was added in. And that's where it got added back in to maintain the check-in requirement and eliminating the characterization of a board member as a frequent visitor or a visitor, or rather than avoiding characterization of board members as anything, just include that language in there for the check-in and then have a separate identification of board members.
So let's hold there for a second. Does anybody have a problem with checking in when they go to a school building when students are there? Okay, so we got that covered. Okay, nobody minds. Okay, so that's done. So the board members at some point in this policy will when the school's in session, they would stop at the front office, say, hey, I'm here in the building. We don't have to tell them why we're there. We just have to let them know that we're there,
Well, again, if you use your badge to badge in, you got to walk through the front office.
which is how it should be. Because school's in session, it's fine.
Yep, fine.
And in your case, Bill, let's say we had to go to a project, you could stop at the office, then go around behind and check in first. Okay, if you're at a project or something,
Yep.
because that was the thing, you go in the back
Right.
door. Well, it's not a problem that they know everybody who's in the building. I think everybody is good. So that part's good. So what's next?
So I mean, isn't the version that Roger just articulated that, I mean, I support that. I thought I said it at the policy committee meeting. I mean, I support your version, Roger.
Yeah. Did they take off the part of the school board members or officers of the state, or is that still on?
No, he said from the MASB.
Is that going to still be on the
Well,
policy?
that's what we're talking about.
That's what we're talking about.
Right.
I prefer the version that Dr. Outlaw put together after talking with you earlier today and talking with the executive committee, where we have all of that language in the board code of conduct, and we removed the section about the board from the operations provisions.
Well, I'm not going to vote for that, but I would vote for the draft that Roger did.
So it's basically, just so we're clear.
Page
I understand it.
page 8 through 10.
The only difference between version 2 and version 3 is the very last section, D, right, of the 3105, right?
Yep.
So it seems like we're basically, well, for 3105, but then there was different
And there's
language for
2302.
2302. Right.
I think it's pretty imperative that we make a statement. The school board's responsibility as board members we're duly elected and we're state officers. I think it needs to be clear.
Well, that's language is from the MASB.
It is, but the point is though, that in the proposal 3, that's not in there.
No, that's why I said, I think that it's well written. I think
So Roger, I believe that school board members, when they take this job, need to realize that they're responsible to that, and the safety and welfare of the students is number one. So, and then education and all that stuff goes with it. So that relays the importance of it. So I don't know why, Dr. Ellis, is there a reason you left it off the third revision of it?
Yeah, the third rendition was just removing the board from the visitor section and basically saying, why don't you talk about it in the board section? That was the only proposal.
Okay.
Was
It's just basically a compromise.
all I
between the two.
was trying to find a compromise. I said 3105 really has to do with visitors. So keep that one visitors, and then whatever you all want to decide, put it in the board one, which is 2302. That was my only suggestion.
Here's the problem that I have with that language though in D. It says that board members have a right to receive a badge. But we have a policy that sets forth requirements for receiving a badge. So are we saying on the one hand that a board member does not have to comply with those procedures when receiving a badge? Because this creates a loophole that would allow that to happen. It would allow a board member to say, I refuse to go through the background checks, but I want my badge anyway. And I don't think that is an appropriate thing for us to enshrine in policy. That's why I prefer the third version that we have in front of us today.
For decades, they've had badges. In this case,
That's not true.
yes, it
It's
is.
not true. Dr. Gray gave us our first set of badges after I was already on the board. That was the first time he'd given board members badges.
I
No,
think I brought my old one.
that's the first time we had electronic
Right.
entries.
Right, because I talked to the board,
That was
Miles is the board president for 19 years as president, but a board member. They had full
Did he have a
access.
key?
Yes, he had a badge. They didn't have swipe entry then, they had open school
I know
doors.
they didn't have
See,
swipe
my concern, here, and I hear what you're saying, Ms. Reed. My concern is if we have badges, there should be a policy that identifies under what circumstance we have badges.
Absolutely.
And so if we don't have D, I don't think that we are adequately, that was what I was trying to address in putting in D, was incorporating what MASB basically provides, creating a framework where there is a specific policy that addresses the right and responsibility if board members do have badge access. And that's also why I put in the last sentence of that paragraph, a school board member who receives an ID access badge must comply with all policies applicable to ID
you
access
go.
badges. So I put that in there specifically, if we want to tweak that language to basically say that there still needs to be compliance with all of the other policies applicable to board members, or some greater specificity, I mean, that's,
We discussed that at
Same
the,
result.
at the policy committee meeting, that
I think we
language.
get the same result with the third version of the policy that we have.
Well, rewrite it and bring it back to the board again.
I don't think we need to.
Well, then let's vote and be done with it.
This
Not
part
up
here,
for
I,
vote
I'm,
tonight, Mr. Tremblay.
we can move it for
It's not up for vote.
if we want to. This particular part, this D, you and I will totally disagree that it should be changed, and your position is clear that you don't want board members to have badges in the public schools. My position is totally the opposite. I believe we are trustees elected to have badges, should have badges. All board members should have badges. And I do support your opinion regarding, entry to the building so people know you're there. All that stuff is all standard, should be standard. But since you walk in the factory somewhere, and he's done it for years, report in, it'd be standard practice. The other thing is that if you are granted ID badges, then having a background check, and you're going to be there amongst the students when the school's going on, that would be standard practice. And all that is standard. So there's nobody here disagreeing with that. But your desire not to have badges at all versus the desire that I believe the rest of the board has, that badges should be issued should the board member want them. Some board members might not even want one. They have that responsibility, but having boots on the ground within those schools has created an environment that you have today by many board members. Goes back to teachers that became board members like Beth Minor and us going in there working on projects. We don't. It's different. As an elected official, you have a duty to do this.
But I don't
I
think,
don't take half the duty.
But here's the thing, this is where we're, from a workshop perspective, like we're plunging over the cliff now, right? And this is where I was advocating to try to bring both of you into the policy committee so you could have dialogue as a policy committee, right? I said it at the policy committee meeting. I'll say it again tonight. I think the language as prepared by Roger was well-written. It was done in collaboration with members of the board. I will support the language as written by Roger. So.
I feel like I need to defend the work that we did at the policy committee meeting here a little bit. You and I have had discussions, Mr. Conley, here at the board table about badge access to buildings.
Yeah.
And I absolutely own that you and I disagree about how we should use our badges and whether we need them to be accessible to all of us. But that is separate from the mandate that I heard this board give us and the work that we were trying to accomplish at the policy committee level to bring back to the board. I feel that I personally need to make it very clear that the work we did at the policy committee, that was a collaboration between 3 board members to come back here, was not to take Alicia Reed's vision of how board members should behave and to bring it back to this board table for us to all vote on. So the versions that you have in front of you were not put there because I'm trying to force everybody to do this job the way I want it to be done. That is absolutely not the text. There is nothing in the text that was originally produced by the policy committee that prevented board members from having badge access to buildings. I just feel like we're
I would
missing
just,
that point.
to reinforce, and Ms. Reed, I've shared this before, publicly. I feel that you've been very fair in your interactions with myself and with Ms. Marks at the policy committee. I don't feel that you've pushed your agenda, as it relates to this particular policy in our discussions as a policy committee. I openly shared with you and with Ms. Marks at the policy committee how I felt about these particular policies, the revisions. I thought we had good discussion and honest, open debate about it. I was frustrated and shared that frustration. I know it got Roger irritated as it relates to Dr. Outlaw, kind of sideswiping me as it related to inviting Bill and John into the policy committee, but I'll let that go. I said in the policy committee, and I said it again tonight, I want to keep reinforcing, I do believe the policy as written by Roger, in collaboration with John in particular, was well-written, and I think it's worthy of our support.
I'd like to make a
I'd
motion.
like to say something. No, I'd like to say something first. So one of the things I'm hearing Ms. Reed saying is she's concerned about a loophole in Part D, that the way this is written. I don't think the intent by removing D is to remove the language that board members will have badge access. The difference is we're moving it from policy 3105 into the other policy in terms of we're taking out all the references to board members out of 3105 and we're putting it into the board member policies. So if you look at the way Dr. Outlaw has revised 18, it actually says that the board members will comply with all requirements about the badges. So it is here, it's just not in 3105.
Right.
So it's not that it's being removed, it's just being moved.
But that's what Roger was just
So,
referring to.
so what you just referenced, Dr. Krebs, is on page 18. That's the change to 2302.
Yes.
Right.
So by taking it out, we're not removing it, we're moving it. I think that's an important thing because it sounds like if we take out that section D, we're not enforcing the idea. The idea by moving it, we're still keeping it there. We're just putting it in the board policies, not under visitor
Right,
policies.
and you're right. And so the final point I was gonna make was, I drafted the changes to 3105, and I'm comfortable with that, those revisions. I do think in looking at the version 2 and version 3 of 2302, I tend to I don't think there's inconsistency between those two. I think the 2302 provides further articulation of the concern, addressing the concern. I would support the third version of 2302. And I think that the two of them in conjunction with each other, that's what I would support. If that, and to your point, Dr. Krebs, that it eliminates, again, the reference to a board member as a visitor or, characterize them as a visitor or volunteer, but it specifies that they will comply, that the board member in 2302 will comply with the requirements applicable to district staff. So it does bring that back in. So that's, as sort of we sit here today, I do still support the changes that I made to 3105. And I support the third version of 2302 that adds that additional language.
I'd like to make a motion to take this to vote to approve Roger's amendment the way it's been written and presented to us.
Can't
As a
make
motion.
Motion to vote during
Well,
the
we'd have to
workshop.
amend the agenda.
Why can't, as long as somebody makes a motion at the table, we can vote on it, can't we? As a board member makes a motion?
Well, we don't have an action item tonight on the agenda, Bill.
Yeah, but you could still ask for a motion, can't we, and vote on it?
Yeah.
So let's get it done with.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve version 2 of 3105
You're
and
right.
2302.
Yep.
And supported by Mr. Conley.
Yep.
All right, is there any further discussion?
Other than it's that one that you authored,
So basically, it's what is
page 8 and 9 or something like that.
page 8 through 13 in the packet. Okay.
Okay.
Second, now I'm confused because I thought we were talking about, this is for both of the policies?
That's what the motion is.
That's what the
Written by
motion is.
Roger. Yep.
Right, 3105 and 2302.
So without combining the third, 18
Correct.
with the third version.
Correct.
As written by Roger's version.
Those pages are 8 through 13.
So it's
Which-
page 11 through 16?
Oh, I'm sorry, did I give you the wrong page
That's
numbers?
what I'm, yeah,
Okay.
11 through 16.
No,
No,
it's not.
I can't tell.
Pages
8 through 13.
That's the
It's 8 through
superintendent's.
13.
Thank you.
It's Johnson and Tyler.
Yeah, so it's 8
And that's what we're
13.
supporting, John's.
I just refer to it as Roger's version. I can't keep track of all this. I've given up trying to keep track of them all.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table. Any further discussion?
Just a roll call vote.
Okay, Ms. Ackerman, roll call vote, please.
Okay, Mr. Storm,
Yes.
Dr. Krebs,
No.
Ms. Reed,
No.
Mr. Conley,
Yes.
Ms. Marks,
Yes.
Mr. Tremblay,
Yes.
Mr. Myers.
Yes. So that passes 5-2.
Yes.
All right.
Scratch that off the list.
So that moves us to item number 2, the contingency allocation. Dr. Outlaw, do you want to pick that up for us? We've got the printout that was provided at table that has the breakdown of the various line items that we've looked at in the past. Is that an
Yes,
accurate?
this is from the January work session.
Okay.
I asked him to prepare this.
Yeah.
To hand it to us.
Do you want me to start, or Mr. Tromba, do you want to start?
Well, so a couple of things I think we could start with if everyone has a sheet. I think you could take off number 5, scratch that off, because that's been taken care of already.
It's already been taken care of, you said?
What's that?
It's already been taken care of, I just wanted.
Yep, so you can scratch that off. The number 8, the science lab, we're already underway with the demolition of that with a prototype being built. So I guess by the end of, I don't know, sometime into this fall, we should have a lab theoretically set up and ready to go for the science teachers and the physics teachers and all of them to look at it, see what they like about it, what they don't like about it. So I think you could scratch that as well. Not necessarily the $1 million, because it's not costing us $1 million yet, but that's underway and being accomplished. Beck mechanical units. I believe this money is going to come out of our, what's it called?
11T.
Yeah, our 11C money, which will allow us to do this, and it won't come out of the bond money. Okay?
So what's 11C money?
It's a grant.
So it's
COVID
11T.
11T.
11T, it's equalization funds. Actually, our local representatives at the time did a great job of advocating for districts that did not. They got a lower proportion of funding over the last few years. And so 11T, and then I know that Mr. Engelter and others met with the state, and we were able to, it's an allowable expense for us to be able to use it for some of the work that needs to be done in this building.
Is there, what's the gross dollars that we have in that fund?
So over the course of 3 years, I believe it was $8.24 million. If I believe that's the number.
So in that, there's a list of things that we can do with it, right?
There's limited number of things.
Yeah.
A good chunk of that was already been spent. This is year 3 of this. So we could talk about that another time, but we are able to address what Mr. Trombley is talking about through those 11T.
Okay. So right now, the balance in that fund, we have the 500 available. What's the remaining balance after the 500?
Probably in a month. You've got us a finance person, so we'll probably be able to get you that answer soon.
Okay. So we have $1 million left, 2 million, 5 million.
So if I'm correct, and don't hold me to this, but the last time that we talked about the balance, I believe $1.1 million was left. I believe that's the number. That's what I recall, but we'll get back to you with the right numbers once we get somebody back on board.
To get that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to have a breakdown of the 8.24 million and where it went in the school system and what it benefited and what it did for us. So when we get to somebody that, comes in that spot, I'd like to see how it was put into the system. Thank you.
And then I think 14 is also going to be addressed with the current work that's going on now, as well as the remodel of the classrooms coming up under the bond. So everything else, I think in there, if you want to go through the items, the domestic cold water supply, because they're galvanized at the high school in Miller. I mean, that's $100 a foot. I got no idea where the $100 a foot came from, nor do I know how many feet that would be. And at this time, if they're not leaking and if there's not an issue because they're galvanized and not copper or plastic, I don't think that's hurting us. The Beck McCann, okay, so then 10, I don't think we should be using bond money to replace ceiling tiles. To me, that's a maintenance issue. That's like painting. That's like everything else. That certainly should be a general fund item. Fire dampers at the penthouse in the high school, that is an issue. I've got no idea what the costs are. But again, I think the idea of tonight is if we can get some kind of consensus or some kind of direction as to what people would like to see, we can start getting costs on these things at the bond meetings and start asking these questions and then bringing it back to you with some type of numbers that would be associated with them.
Bill, at Scranton, you said fire dampers?
No, that's at the high school,
At the high
in
school.
the penthouse, yes.
What's
So-
the,
Go ahead.
What's that?
what's the, explain why we are in that position that whether it wasn't done?
Well, because a lot of them aren't operable.
Right,
And with the new with the HVAC system and the changes, no one's bothered to go back and
see,
update them.
but wasn't that proposed when we updated the other systems?
It was, but again, the way things got designed, the engineers didn't necessarily,
So they're wide open right now,
I don't know if they're open or closed or partly open. I couldn't tell you that.
but they're not operable.
They're not operable. No. And there's a good chunk of them.
So Bill, I was going to ask, is there
Yep.
air conditioning in the gymnasium?
No. Yes and no. If you want to shut off part of the school or the high school and not air condition the classrooms, that's enough capacity to air condition the gym.
So like in the summer months when school's not in session,
That's correct.
we technically would be able to utilize air conditioning in the gymnasium?
That's correct. We have shut-off valves that would allow you to divert the system in order to cool the gym.
And I know you're not like the facilities crew of the district. Are you aware if is that a big job to do that? I mean, can you go to a control panel and activate that?
No, they're manual valves that have to be turned on and off, but I believe the maintenance people know how to do that.
The reason
would
I
have to know
ask
how to
is,
do
and
that.
I'll talk about this later at the end when we do our little round table, but it's related. My daughter plays volleyball on the volleyball team. And in the past few weeks when it was 95 degrees with 98% humidity.
Yep.
They're in a closed gym playing volleyball.
How
and
did it happen
the
there?
Temperature in there is near 100 degrees.
Yep.
And
With high
she came
humidity.
home and I've never investigated if there's air conditioning, but if we have air conditioning capability.
Yes.
I just wonder, and maybe this is something I can take offline, but why would we not use the air conditioning if the air conditioning is available?
Good question.
Well, I mean, but didn't you answer the question? Because then you eliminate it in the rest of the,
Classroom area.
Yeah, but it's,
But if the classrooms aren't being
closed, no
used
one's
in the
session.
summer.
Class-
well, I mean,
class-
there's, right now, aren't there people in prepping and isn't there people occupying the buildings?
Maybe at this time they are.
That's what I'm saying. I mean,
I
yeah.
don't know.
I don't know, be now, they're getting ready to open.
Right.
I was just surprised in this.
So
day and
those
age.
valves and that was put in the last bond in order to be able to do that. But again, we didn't have capacity as overall in the system. We could do one or the other.
The other thing I would share on the balance in the system, we're fighting battles in these buildings, with the construction materials, be it concrete block and these steel roofs and the moisture problem. So shutting down the units and being that they UV humidify, you've got certain conditions without them within the whole structure. You wouldn't want to shut them down because if they're items like a building that's closed up and not getting fresh air in it, right? Those systems have air recirculation.
So I guess, is there an item on here then that would allow us to get out of the?
Andy,
manual
here's another
valve?
thing, and again,
2.2 million.
you know how cool these nights have been. We can certainly pull fresh air in at nighttime to cool that gymnasium
Yeah,
with the fans.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm not so sure anybody's bothering to do that.
And then you have to be
But
careful.
you can,
so is that what the chiller is then, John? I heard you say, so the chiller there is the 2.1 million, that would be like a
Capacity.
world-class
That's additional
2023
capacity.
AC system for the high school?
It's additional capacity, which we've talked about for several years, is we have a limited capacity of what we have. We continue to expand the school in size and square footage, and we found limits, and it has its limits. It's been very successful. It has no backup, I understand.
This is the double the size of the ice farm.
So that gives you more capacity.
So is this in the works?
No,
Not right now.
How does the rest of the board feel about air conditioning for the high school? Like having sufficient capacity for the whole facility?
So we had, I would say the last time we talked about the chiller, we had some experts in that provided estimates on the capacity that was needed for the high school, the capacity that we had, and the millions of dollars that it was going to take to add additional capacity did not find favor with the board because we had more than enough capacity to cover what we felt like we needed to cover at the time. At least that's what the experts that came to talk to us said. Obviously, it's not covering the gymnasium, but
Right, and in seriousness, did anybody run the controls that we have for fresh air returns? And the key to those returns are humidity outside, making sure that if you're pulling in 100% humidity.
Yeah, no, I
you
get
have- But they don't necessarily have those controls in place. So if they're manually turning on the vent to clear out all the air, then somebody's got to manually turn it off. Or if you're bringing in air at 100% humidity, you're at 100% humidity.
Yeah, and I guess my question was just as a board, is there support amongst the board to air condition the high school campus in a manner that provides enough capacity to air condition the campus?
well, honestly, I think we need air conditioning in this gym here. I don't know if you've seen these kids here during the summer at all, but that's 100 degrees in the gym here at Beck.
Yeah, my
And they're
kids
using
all
it for summer school.
What's that?
They're using it for summer
Yeah,
school.
right,
I mean,
yeah.
Scranton, to be fair, Scranton gym does not have air conditioning either.
That's
So
correct.
it's
That's
not,
right.
the high school's not the only one
That's
that's
correct.
living with a hot gym.
So could we start evaluating opportunities to air condition them? I think it's.
Dr. Arlo, has there been discussion, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think this is great to talk about. I just wanted to reiterate that there's only $1.2 million left in contingency funds, and that was what we were looking at, how to spend that last 1.2 million. So anything above that, obviously, you'd have to talk about where that funding source is going to come from. Just wanted to reiterate that.
well, I will share that, one of the things that I've talked about at the bond committee meeting is the commitment that we've made to the science lab remodels at the high school. And I would say that, unless we have a fire safety issue and we need to update the fire dampers, my first choice for the rest of those contingency dollars is to continue with the work on the high school science labs. We've started the demo and I'm really excited about all of the work that is going into planning and playing with that space so we can test out different things to then move out to the other labs. But I think that we should see that project through with the additional 1.2 million rather than sending it off someplace else, unless there's a safety issue for the fire
I
dampers.
will fully support that all day, every day. I think that's
I'm
fantastic.
in agreement.
From a reality check, we have, how many science rooms do we have, Dr. Ola?
At the high school, I believe you have 11.
11?
11.
So just in round numbers, if we had 10, we spent 100,000 each room, there's our $1 million.
Yeah.
Now,
And would that do it? I mean, if you looked at with $100,000,
We don't know yet.
it's,
I doubt it will.
it's about
I mean,
50,000 for demo right now.
okay.
Just reiterated that.
I would strongly advocate that we have the best physics and science labs in the entire United States in Brighton schools.
Here's my biggest concern with all of this. Not that I don't want to do this because I think it's great as well, but there's science, there's physics, and what is the other?
There's biology.
Biology that would be using those rooms.
Yeah, they're all science. You have biology, you have chemistry, you have physics. So, and then you have.
So we have what, 4
environmental
or 5
science.
different types of rooms?
Just several different types of rooms.
Okay, so
And-
here's my biggest concern. We get the one done, the teachers come in, they all decide what they want and what they don't like, okay? Maybe that teacher's only teaching biology for a year, okay? Then they go and teach something else and a new biology teacher comes in. That's not what the new biology teacher wants, number one. Number two, in renovating and redoing 5 different types of rooms like that, which theoretically would be 2 rooms of each type if we had 5, how long is that process going to take? How long is it going to take for the people to decide what they really want? And then how long is it going to take to build it? And by the way, how long do we have for us to spend our bond money?
You're in the final year here, so
Thank you.
it's, so the
School year or calendar year
calendar year, I believe we're through, is it December
of this year?
of
2024.
I think in order to spend it, because we have a project next summer. We're doing Hilton bathrooms next summer.
But as long as the project's underway,
Yes.
as long as the project has started, we can continue with it.
And some of the things that our initial conversations about the science rooms, one was flexible furniture so that you're able to adjust. So what you're talking about, flexible furniture can apply to any of the rooms. You know, in a physics classroom, there might be a time where you want all the tables in the middle, another time where you want to push them out so you can do experiments on the floor. So flexible furniture across the nation is a big move with the science rooms. The other area we've talked a lot about is the different technologies in there. We want technologies that will be more hands-on science for students. So that's the kind of things that we've been looking at, things like more advanced microscopes, VR goggles. There's a whole bunch of
3D printers.
all things that we don't have now that are going to stretch us to that next level. So those are some of the conversations we had. I think focusing on C8, what we had talked about was really investing in that room as an experimental room to find out what we want for the long haul. I think that's a wise move.
So at a prior board meeting, I'd asked a question about benchmarking, and I'm terrified that the train is going to leave the station here, and we're going to 10 months from now say, here's this room that a group of people in Brighton, Michigan developed. Whomever's involved, are we actually going out and benchmarking world-class learning institutions, which many are within a short drive of our school here?
Yeah, I think Dr. Outlaw has done a wonderful job trying to bring in additional insights from around the state and around the country so that we've got good ideas to put in front of our staff and then start planning for, what we'd like to test out. And I see having this focus for our contingency dollars as an extension of the overall goal of the bond. Because remember, these are still bond dollars. And what we went to the public with was a commitment to dramatically improve STEAM education within the district. That's why we invested in the additional space at the high school. We've invested in each of the
commitment was
buildings.
10 million worth in STEAM, and we've spent that.
I know, and this is a further
Strong.
extension of that commitment, I think. I think that's why it's important for us to continue that work in this classroom, even acknowledging, as Mr. Trunkley alluded to, that this isn't going to be enough to do all of the work to fix up all of the science rooms at the high school. This is really just a start, but I think it's an important start.
I mean, just some food for thought. I don't know how this works from a budget process to be able to facilitate something like this, but I would love to advocate for a cross-section of teachers and students, high school, middle school, elementary students, members of the community, that we could send to the MIT Media Lab, Stanford, University of Michigan, like 3 top learning institutions, and actually take stakeholders from our district into those lab environments to be able to see with their own eyes how those learning institutions are teaching students how to use technology. Because I think it would open up people's minds way beyond, I mean, what's happening today in that space extends far beyond what I think many in our community think is even possible as it relates to artificial intelligence, controls programming, PLCs, robots, 3D printing, like granting people involved in this initiative exposure in those their lab environments versus ours, I think would be very, very compelling.
Just to note, that's what we did with the Health Ox.
I was going to share that.
Well, and look at the success of the Health Ox Lab, right?
Reach out just so everybody understands how that happened.
Well, let's,
But
I'm
it-
trying to keep things on track though.
Thank you, but it's important. I'll make it short.
Okay.
Thank you. Bill made contact with the University of Michigan. University of Michigan then invited our group to come to their facility. Bill helped align that.
Was
So
it
it's-
well received? I mean, was it a worthwhile endeavor?
Very helpful.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's what ours
So
is
very
modeled
helpful.
after.
So back to what you're
100%.
saying. So I just want to support that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Rich. I'll let it ride from there.
And I think ultimately the discussion tonight was just to kind of get a consensus of, we've got $1 million, we're gonna have about $1 million too, and for bond contingency.
with any of the
Right.
current projects.
Right.
And we have
assuming-
general fund to come, so we have some
So the
dollars.
question is, in terms of the prioritization, we talked about before, the prioritization, it's, among the board members was for the two science labs. I mean, it seems like that's kind of the consensus. I mean, there's obviously some other topics we've talked about as far as the chillers, the fire dampers, that's probably for another day. But in terms of where we are with the bond contingency.
I would love to advocate for putting those dollars into the hands of teachers and students and having the best labs in the state of Michigan, if not the United States.
Dampers, then we'll pay for that out of general fund.
Yep.
Let's just get the money allocated and let's get it done.
All right.
Super.
Okay, that moves us on to item 3, the facility planning sinking fund. You want to launch that, Dr. Alla?
Sure. I mean, this is a follow-up conversation. We had this, I believe, last year, so this would be first with the new board. I'm going to put this in front of you all. This is a conversation for you all to talk about priorities, preference. We are going to, in your packet, you have the taxable growth projections that have been done by Baker Tilly. Those have been revised. These were done, these were done recently. And as you see, in December of 25, we're going to have a fairly significant drop off in our millage rate. So as we're coming to the end of the 2019 bond, I think it's an important discussion for the board to have as we look at long-term facility planning, as we look at what might come next. I think it's important there. I don't think there's any immediate decisions that need to be made, but I think there's dialogue among the board about maybe what needs to happen today, what things you need in order to help you facilitate that discussion for what future millage or bonds might be taking place.
So in this, we have currently fund equity. We have currently millions of dollars we're in the black. So technically this year, we don't need this. But going forward down the road, we don't know, what the state funding is going to be, or if they'll reduce per pupil funding. And so today I don't support this, but going forward, what are you thinking of, what amount millage would you request in a fundraising activity, and how many years would it be for?
So I wouldn't put out a number right now. I think that Mr. Trombley has suggested, and I think it's a great suggestion. We've been talking about it for too long, but
Right.
they're a facility planning matrix. So we've started with a couple areas. For example, Mr. Jacobs has put together a lifetime of each roof, each parking lot, and some of the boilers and these things. And it will say, this is the year that it was installed. For example, I forget which school it was, but I looked at the school and it was 2042, it's supposed to be replaced. Looking and projecting at what some of those costs would be year by year, and then I would ratchet what you might look at for a sinking fund, perhaps, connected to whatever those needs are. So sinking fund is one option. That would be the year to year. That would be able to keep that rate lower. The other option is to look at a bond somewhere down the road, whenever that might be. Obviously, we're just completing one now. So I don't have a recommendation right now. I think step one would be to determine the year by year what those projections are. As part of sinking funds, it also includes buses. So I would like to include the buses in that conversation, bus replacement by year. So those are some of the things that I think you would probably need to know.
From a use standpoint, can you just share a couple of the ways that a sinking fund differs from a bond? Obviously, one is cash that we're collecting, the other one is a loan that we're taking out. But what are the other differences that the board needs to be aware of?
Sure, there are, a bond is, a bond ultimately, it's more like a mortgage on a home. You build your home and then you pay it off for the next 30 years. A millage is year by year dollars that you could adjust within the limitations, but every year you can allocate it. It's more like having a plan in your home that, okay, my roof is this many years old. I know in 3 years that I have to replace the roof of my home. It's planning in that regard that, okay, in 2028, we may not have to replace the turf at the field. And the next year, we might have to do the roof at Hilton and the parking lot at such and such. So you can plan year by year with the millage, but it's more of a maintenance type approach. But you also can, you can build, you can do certain construction. There are limitations though within that, but those are the big things. If you're going to build buildings and things like that, a bond really is probably the way to go.
You're also saving up money, right? So part of that planning is that, no, we have to spend it all the year that it comes in.
You get X amount per year to spend for a period of time.
But no interest then, right?
Here's-
Because versus a bond where you're incurring interest. Okay.
That's correct, and Bill and I go back many years at this, and he and I didn't ever agree on the $88 million bond because I believe we should have raised the sinking fund rate at the time high enough that we could have brought the money in interest-free. We could have done this work without paying double. Because again, we financed this whole project. We're paying out over 30 years. My belief was to have a higher sinking fund number that would then allow other dollars. And you can't use sinking fund dollars for everything. It's maintenance and upkeep and all that stuff. But this bonding of things and bonding for carpet, and like Bill said, we don't want to use bond dollars for ceiling tiles. You pay multiple times what you got by the time you've paid this off. So the idea behind a sinking fund can help control that. And back when, I would have supported at the time a crazy, a $10 million sinking fund, and we had one at one time, and then it went away and we didn't renew it or whatever it was. So I think that the board could talk about in reality, because when you look at these rates dropping, in an economy that right now we don't know where it's going for folks, but and it's already coming down a little bit. That does affect that 18 mills, correct? This is an actual reduction in taxes as this comes down to the taxpayers in Livingston County and Brighton specifically, that service Brighton schools. So our job as custodians of the funds is to keep their tax rate as low as possible and do the best job here that's possible. And if that includes a sinking fund, to do that without going and running another bond in X number of years, instead like running up to 10 years, say, oh, by the way, now we got to have a bond for this amount. If you had a higher sinking fund, but yet actually kept the millage rate lower over that time, you're doing a service for the taxpayers. Because I think it can be done. And I don't like paying interest on money that's not making money. If you're making, it's one thing, this is fixed assets here that you're addressing. And I don't know, does sinking fund, would that be allowed for renovation of science labs?
Yeah, you can use that money for it, but the problem again is like a bond, if we get $80 million worth of bond money, we can spend that money over 3 years or 5 years, any way we want. We can spend 50 million one year, 20, and then 10, right? A sinking fund, you only allowed to spend that amount of money per
We're
year.
going to argue again. Let's start the argument. And then we're going to prepare ourselves to spend it the year we collect it.
Yeah, well,
Okay, we'll do plans.
but
and
if-
set
but
it
if-
up and do bids.
let's say if we go for what, a mill, that's worth what, two and a half million?
About 2.6 million.
Yeah. So that's, if we do a mill for 5 years and a sinking fund,
Okay.
that would give us $2.6 million a year
So it's,
to spend.
yeah, over
So if we wanted to put in
13 million.
an addition to a school building and it cost us 5 million, we could only spend the 2.6 for that year,
Per calendar year.
per calendar year.
Which could come in to be the right thing to do, because instead of mortgaging it out over 30 years and paying twice the
Well,
amount or 3 times the amount,
yeah,
because
let-
if we fund a classroom, hear me
Yeah.
out for a second.
Yep.
So I'd like to say the numbers, and superintendent, when we get our new finance chief, we can throw this at him. Show
Mm-hmm.
me what we're really going to spend over 20 and 30 years versus if we just took the money and spent it today. Because if we can show that to this community, that we are going to do this, we can get support to do it right.
Well-
And not have all that interest. And look at right now, look at what it's dropping to in 25. It's
Right.
going to go down to 3, 5, 8, 9. Right now, we're paying 7.
And if we don't maintain that, then we're going to lose it.
Well,
So,
well, that's what we're seeing in other communities. They're going to put it out there so that doesn't fall off, and they're going to keep charging the same
That's
tax rate because they think the money's in the coffers because they're already paying it. Oh, everybody's happy with that. Well, not everybody's happy with this.
well, here's the thing, a bond is always cheaper than a sinking fund for the taxpayers,
Why?
less per year that they pay.
Well, not if it's just 1 mil, because I'm looking at it this way. So instead of 7.19 is going down to
Yeah.
6 to
So how
5
much will a
to
mill
3.
cost a taxpayer?
How much does a mill cost a taxpayer? Not right now in this economy, I don't know.
Well, but my point being is if you look at that over an $80 million bond fund over 30 years, it's a heck of a lot cheaper. That's why we've gone with the bond for the last couple of years.
maybe, maybe
It
not.
also allows you to do big projects like the STEAM Center.
What's that?
It
Well, we're-
also allows you to do.
Yeah,
big
that's-
projects
that's
like the
correct.
STEAM
Which is how we got
Yeah.
approval to do that, because we
Yep.
added that to doing ceiling tiles.
Yep.
Remember?
Right, but if it's
Okay.
maintenance, if
Right.
you're looking at a maintenance budget versus a building new budget, then maybe it is more appropriate.
But this frees up the general fund at that allowing minimum that it would free up, because the general fund, in the way per pupil funding works, is the money comes in from the state per pupil. We're supposed to allocate those dollars to make our payroll, which is the highest cost, to maintain our buildings and build our classrooms. It's all in per pupil funding. And at this time, currently, the amount of money that's coming into the school district is twice what it was when we started this job. I did. It was around 50 million originally, and now we're excess of 100 million. We're 100 and, what was our adopted budget, 115? Is that correct? Okay, adopted budget at 115. When you and I were here originally, it was 50 something. Okay, so now we have the same number of students. So we're expected as board members to be trustees of those dollars coming in to allocate dollars for per pupil funding, not just in payroll, in all of these projects, to line item this stuff. Like for now, we have a budget for the finance committee. We have dollars that are available, and Alicia's working on I'm glad to see that she's picked up that ball very good, that we're working on these science labs. I'm glad to appropriate the funds and try to bring it to the finance committee, then bring it back to a board vote as you get your experimental labs built, to use those taxpayers' dollars that we have in the accounts to use it. It's there to be used. We don't need that much added to fund equity. We need those dollars to benefit students. I think our fund equity is good. We've been left in decent position. So this is a real important topic. And if we use this and go back to the community and say, we're only going to raise you up a mill or whatever it is, and you're not going back to 7.9, and so you're going to stay at 4, whatever it is. And we get enough money from that, and we can use it for what we need going forward without having to run a big bond later. Because if you look at what we paid out versus what we really got and what we're paying in interest, we could have got a lot more if we had the cash. Okay, we just didn't get as much as we could have got. I'm sure of it. And back when we proposed the original bond and it was going on, and you and I weren't agreeing at that time, that was the reason we didn't agree. It wasn't that we didn't agree, we needed improvements. So let's stay with the idea we need improvements and continue improvement and find the best way to bring the dollars in.
So I guess, on this, ultimately, no big decisions tonight, but I think there's more conversations that are going to be needed from the board. I think the thing that I would ask for is, what do you need from us in order to help you make that decision? Facility planning, mapping that out, I think is one piece of the puzzle. We've talked about some of the different levers as far as like how much money and how many we could put together some models for that. I think once we get our new finance person here in the district, I've already talked with Mr. Jacobs about it, and he started with some of the different pieces of the puzzle. Maybe it's something we can bring to the bond committee down the road a little bit to look at. Maybe this is a conversation we can have later this year.
Yeah, and I think that, part of I think for what has to be looked at is really twofold. One is the long-term facilities management because in 2012, when the bond was approved, this was before I was on the board,
88 million.
there was, the district was in severe, our facilities were in shambles, and we were in financial straits. The 2019 bond really was a combination of things that just weren't included in the 2012 bond, that just got left out because it was already at 88 million, but still needed to be addressed.
Well, superintendent at the time, he brought it all up. He said it needed to be done.
And the STEAM Center, the indoor facilities. So now we're at a point now where we've addressed really all of the big ticket items, the facilities in terms of the new construction, the things that were really left in disrepair. And a lot of it was because of deferred maintenance, because the district didn't have the financial wherewithal to deal with and properly maintain the facilities for years and years, until it got to the point where now it became a much more expensive ticket that we had to, as a district, tackle in a bond. I don't want to ever be there again. And I think the best vehicle for us to avoid doing that is to have an appropriate number for a sinking fund where we can properly address the management of our facilities. We have all these amazing state-of-the-art facilities. We want to keep them that way. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is if we properly address through, and in my opinion, a sinking fund, and not get to a point where it just becomes deferred maintenance. And then 10 years from now, we're looking at a much bigger problem that we have to deal with again. So
we don't need one today.
no, I'm not saying
I
today.
know, but
Personally, I mean, to me, it looks like 2025 is probably going to be the year that we would be looking at.
Well, when if the state cuts back, like again, as we go into our budget cycle at 4 million plus, it may be 6 million surplus budget. We don't have to add any burden to taxpayers. We have enough money to have our own program to do our maintenance. Because in the per pupil funding alone, without that excess budget that we have this year at the just under 10,000 per student, we have an allocation for maintenance and budget to do that. The key is if you're going to, in my opinion, if you're going to do this, we need to have a site on the science labs and other things that we would use those general fund dollars to build, should we have a sinking fund to supplement. That's how I would go at this.
Yeah.
You really is true. The sinking fund has no interest. So you can, if the taxpayers give you $10 million a year, it's interest-free money, have it ready to spend, build 10 science labs, whatever it is. So, and I think this community, because of how well the school has performed and continues to perform, this is something the community has gotten behind all the time. So if it's a mill increase and we go back up to 5 or we run at 4.5, I don't think anybody's going to care. I don't think we have to go all the way back to 7 to do this, because then you'd be running another $60 million bond, right? It's not necessary. But anyway, that's just a.
So we're getting to the point now, and again, this was just discussed in the last bond meeting. I think if you start looking at the schools, the improvements we've made, I can use Malpe for an example. Right now, Malpe's been completely overhauled between this last bond and the bond prior. New HVAC systems, new windows, new parking lot, new pumps. We don't need a roof at Malpe until, what was it, 24 more years or something like that, Matt? So right now, you can just about check Malpe off the list, right? Malpe's pretty well taken care of. Now, hopefully within the next couple more bond meetings, we're going to continue through these schools like that, checking them off, right? So every one of these schools, and then pretty soon we're going to get to a point where somebody's going to need something that we forgot about or that hasn't been done that's going to be needed to be done. But that's about to the point of where we're getting now with the last 2 bonds, where these schools have been completely overhauled. Becca's going to be a good example between this year and next year, what's going to happen here for the preschool. Windows, HVAC system, doors, those kinds of things. So again, just moving forward.
So right now, we spent $148 million in 10 years. So $148 million has been put in. So in the 148, I'd like to know what we actually are spending for that 148. We spent, I hate to think, 10 or 20 million in fees. And then we spent, now we're going to have interest on the 148 and what that actually costs us. So I'll go back to, like I said, I'm supporting this all as far as how we're going to maintain the district. I'd like to see what the needs are.
I don't mind me supporting anything that's going to maintain this district. What bothers the heck out of me is when we spend money and the things don't get maintained the way they're properly supposed to be maintained. That's my biggest complaint. And that's why I'm not going to support a sinking fund until somebody comes up with a list of the items that are going to be taken care of and the cost involved with it. And then we put that out, figure out how many mills it's going to cost the taxpayers, and then we put it out to the taxpayers. That's the only way I'll support a sinking fund.
But it's going to be a 5 and 10 years out. It's not going to
Fine.
be 1 year. It can't.
Right.
So, all right, so we can agree to disagree on something. Okay.
Okay, all right, so that wraps up the discussion with regard to the facilities planning sinking fund. Mr. Conley, there were a couple of things
Yeah, thank you.
that we wanted to raise with respect to the Finance Committee.
Yep, we met this morning on the Finance Committee, and on the agenda, we reviewed vape detectors for the remaining, I should say, from the prototype stage to final enactment of a vape detector program, and I call it BAS Fights Vapes. So we're making an effort to make a difference. We were able to budget $100,000, and I believe we are all in agreement. Dr. Krebs?
We're in agreement, but
This is just for board consensus, so you can keep moving and getting bids and stuff. Not going to vote on it tonight.
Right, okay.
So what we discussed the need, we had Deputy Schuster in representing the Scranton, and one of the manufacturers, and in an agreement, he had talked to our officer at the high school, and they decided on a brand, and that brand seems to perform better than the others. And so in a going forward move on the next, would be the 11th, would be our next board meeting, I'd like to put on for action that we would approve $100,000 general fund expenditure for these materials. And if somebody comes to me with another funding source for these, be it under some emergency or some other act from the state or security, I would certainly look at that. But at this time,
Why don't we wait until the next
Well,
meeting?
We don't have the information on it.
Right, well, I think the best way to go about it is to have a consensus where we're authorizing the district to get bids.
Right.
To get multiple bids for that particular brand that are, yeah, that's what I would do.
put on for a vote.
Yeah, then we get the bids and then we come back and that's
But
what
I don't want to delay. I want to get, here's what I also proposed, which didn't necessarily get consensus, but was a way to lock the classroom, or not classroom, but the bathrooms, and maybe have a key in the students' classrooms.
Deputy Schuster had some issues with that.
He
right?
did, but that's, like I said, it's another idea in order to get it started sooner than later. And I have access to the, and Deputy Schuster had some ideas about security potentials, and there's a pro and con to everything. And I'm open-minded to listen to all the cons over the pros. But in this case, we are in a position to, I believe we have to take action, and it needs to be taken right away, which we're doing, and not delay. And that way they can get this underway, and maybe by the meeting on the 11th, we can have the things basically set to order. The board can approve it and have them installed to help our officers do this, because they can't keep up with it. It's so hard on them. And that's why I'm saying if the bathrooms, they're having trouble. They're on one end of the school, the other. They report back to us was that where the vape detectors were installed, students figured it out. He was very positive on the results, but as soon as they figured it out, they were moving to the next area. And then the teachers couldn't cover it because one class was being on and the other one wasn't present. And I listened to all the scenarios. It's an unbelievable kind of ball of marbles in there trying to address it. Mr.
So I was just going to say, I think to Roger's point, John, I sense that we
We're all on the
support.
same page.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we-
Okay, good. So let's,
So is the direction that we can proceed with
please.
starting the bid process
get the bid
now,
process going.
not have to wait
Good question.
for formal vote?
Why is John, as a board member, advocating for these vape detectors when we employ a Brighton police officer, or two of them, we employ a Livingston County sheriff, we have an armed security force that we employ, we have principals who are supposed to be in charge of their schools? Why aren't they here advocating for these vape detectors? Why is it a board member advocating for them?
Well, we ran a pilot and
So what's the result of the pilot? Who's brought those results back to us and how that's been successful or not?
we had Deputy Schuster at the Finance Committee as he was sharing, and he said that they've had positive
So
results.
how many vapes did he, or what was his recommendation?
What is his recommendation? His recommendation is the same recommendation as the administration's, is the same as the Finance Committee's, which is to proceed and complete the vape. There's
Is that
30,
admitted? Is
30
that their-
36 new
It's in
vapes
minutes,
that would need to be
Yeah.
implemented.
So the administration asked the finance committee to approve the 100,000.
But I mean, Bill, in fairness, you bring up a very good point. Right? So we would benefit as a board from having someone come in for 10 minutes and provide an update on the outcome of the test that was run. It's I think, a very fair point. So,
Well-
yes, Deputy Schuster did come in. I sit on the Finance Committee.
Okay,
But I think what you're asking for is different than coming into the Finance Committee. It's how can, not only for the board's benefit, but for the community's benefit, can we provide an update on something that's very serious and affecting a lot of kids? My own, one of whom is sitting in the room.
Yeah.
So,
mine graduated last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously there's one thing on the agenda for tonight.
No,
So
but it's
the
for us.
idea was that we brought it
Board.
forward so
But
they get the ball
do it.
rolling, and then I totally agree, when we come back with bids, then we can have Deputy Schuster make a presentation.
I don't know that we need to, Roger. Here's what happened.
Well, I'm addressing the criticism as to why nobody's here to talk about it. Well, it wasn't on the agenda. I'm not here.
But I mean, Bill, it's his comments fair, Roger. I agree with him.
For 100,000.
We're not asking for 100,000. We're asking to bid the process. Start the bidding, and then we'll come back. That's what we're doing.
Okay, all right. No, I'm good with that. I'm just wondering why a board member is bringing it compared to the
Here's
administration.
the thing. I called Deputy Schuster. Yes, we've done this. We've all worked in our areas, and I think that we're getting better on all this together. We're
Okay.
trying to do things, and like I said, I'm encouraged with things. So just each person brings a little piece to this.
Okay.
And I'm proud to be able to help. So we're going to do that. So that comes up the 11th. And then for a vote that we'll take action on it. We'll make a forward step. And like I said, I'm calling it a BAS policy, but it's not yet a policy, but BAS fight fake budget. So we're meeting also with other school districts, and I hope they have done the same. And we're learning from them. There's no reason we should be in this alone. They're all facing the same thing. All right. And then the other thing I had, what else did I have? Vape detectors.
For the health ops
Yes, just
assistant.
another similar situation, not as urgent as the vape detectors, but important. Through Dr. Darga and the superintendent, we were able to work through a job description for our health occupations for a professional assistant for her in health ops lab. I did ask for this. I did ask him to look into it. I asked him to go back to the teacher, and she is all in agreement. I felt that the load we were putting on her needed assistance. So they wrote a job description, which is very good. I have a copy of it here. And I'd like the board to consider on the 11th for action item. Today we discussed $30,000 budget for this part-time person to assist.
I absolutely agreed. I thought that was a good call. One of the things I liked about it was coming from the teacher, that she had a way she would use it. My concern is that we're now getting things out of the procedure of how we're doing things. The purpose of putting things on for future action is so that we can investigate, so we can learn about them, rather than bringing it forward and voting at the first meeting we see it. People have not had a chance to see this yet and to discuss this before we go to vote.
Why does it even come to the board? Can't the principals and people hire teachers?
I don't know, but I'm just saying this idea that we have to keep pushing these
Right.
things.
Why is it
You know
even
what
got?
just happened with the CFO?
Yeah.
I mean, I got a text message today saying that we want to hire a CFO tonight,
I agree
and we
with
did.
that. And that was time, because that was time sensitive. We wanted that done quickly. I'm just saying is we decide that we want some things to go through procedures. When we had the cameras coming through, we had to stop the whole thing with the cameras. Talked about Deputy Schuster, what he really wanted, he wants cameras all over the place. Those cameras didn't happen because we had to stop because we weren't following procedures. We can't decide to follow some procedures and not other procedures. I'm just trying to make sure we're consistent.
But I think, I mean, as a board, right, we do this for the superintendent. We exercise judgment in front of the public, so it's done in the public domain. We exercise judgment. I express an enormous amount of frustration to Roger in particular, and he takes it well, of trying to get things on the agenda so we can move things along quicker. In this particular situation, do any of us on this board object to supporting the Health Ops program at Brighton Area Schools?
Not at all.
I don't.
But I think we need to be careful that we're not picking and choosing what we're deciding to rush through. It's a procedural process. We need to be careful how we're doing this. If we're going to consider it for some things, we need to be consistent.
But why is it even coming to the board?
Well, because Mr. Conley wanted to talk about it. and-
Well,
But
So,
wouldn't the
in defense
principal
of what
just
she's
hire
not
like
wrong. So
EAs?
It's a new position. It's an allocation. It is a general fund expenditure of setting aside
And-
$30,000. So
right up front, here's
I don't
what
think we
happened.
just-
Let's just talk about what happened. Just like the situation in the vape detectors, our job, we're entrusted to do what we see. Okay, and so what I saw was a full capacity program plus some, putting a high burden on one of our, she's a wonderful teacher.
Phenomenal.
So great. So our job then, if the wisdom leads us that direction between all of us, is to support this person and all persons, like you've said. What are we going to do with this one? What about over here? How do we handle this if we have a similar situation and overload? But moving forward, we adopted new curriculum. We adopted pre-med. We have a full program. We have an overload situation, from what I understand, and we need to back her up so that she's successful, and that's immediate.
Yeah, but she's not here asking for it.
Here's the problem. That's where the board comes in as the visionaries. Do you think that the lab got built without you and myself, Bill,
No,
in the beginning?
no.
Okay, we built 3 of these labs, Bill, together. Remember that. That was Bill and I originally brought it back, and we built the first classroom and the next classroom because we were in the school and saw the need of the teacher and what was going on and the potential development. Bill being a business builder, construction guy, me being just a self-employed person with 3 kids that I grew up. And again, what you want opportunities for these kids. So in sincerity, it's something that I bumped into and mentioned it to Dr. Outlaw, and then went through Dr. Darga and did the channels and followed that procedurally to the best of my ability versus just, hey, by the way, we got to do this today. This is going through the steps. And I would believe that this is a very impactful thing for a huge number of students for, like I said, the growth of what we've asked this particular instructor.
I'm not arguing we don't need one. I'm just arguing why is it coming from you and not a principal or the director of curriculum?
Because we're signing.
That's my point.
It's fine, it did. So we're gonna, just what I'd like to do is have this particular one, and in the future, we can maybe do better, but I'd like to have this in a budgetary situation for action on the 11th. And if anybody has any other questions, Dr. Outlaw has the job description. HR.
I'll have to get it from whoever's working on it.
Liz has it, and Dr. Darga can send out what the job description is. I'd actually also like the board to recommend that we go ahead and post the position so we can get started on getting active candidates ahead of that vote on the 11th and see who applies, because that's the other problem.
We can't apply.
We've done it all the time. We did it for this last position. And we need to have people to fit these needs. We have other classes that need this same kind of attention, and we won't bring that up tonight.
Well, okay, but let's take a step back. If we're going to put it on for future action.
Not for future, for action.
I mean, for action,
That's what
for
I
action
requested.
on the 11th.
Yeah.
Whenever there is a proposed new position that's up for action, does the administration post that position before it's actually approved by the board? Or is it posted in advance before it's?
I recall getting called into a special meeting not that long ago where a position for principal was not posted.
No, a new position, not a person filling, not a new person filling an existing position. That's what I'm talking about, is a new.
You're
Position.
saying brand new position. I follow you, Roger.
Yeah, I have not had that experience where we've posted prior to a new position that would be new to the district. I've not seen that before.
So then maybe we have to wait.
I mean, I don't have a problem with having
I
it be
just
on
wanna-
it for action on the
it came
11th,
up-
but.
Actually, in the finance committee, it came up, can we find someone? Well, the sooner we start looking, the better chance we have of filling it. And I believe with the abilities that I acquired over these generations, that we're in a position to make a management move here that will assist this department and that program in high level of success.
I've mentioned this at the committee level. I've mentioned this at board meetings publicly. My daughter has been a beneficiary of the Health Ox program, and it's incredible. She's currently attending LCC at their Howell campus and attending free of charge as a senior in Brighton area schools. Very excited to be about, taking anatomy and physiology. It's, as someone whose family's been personally touched by this program, it's life-changing for these young students. And the teacher who has started the program and leads the program today does an absolutely phenomenal job with those students, phenomenal job. And Jennifer and I, when we first joined the board, were fortunate to go through that lab and got a full tour. And it is a huge bright spot for our district. And I just want to share that again, because it's a huge success.
Absolutely. Okay.
If I know we're over our 9 o'clock target. But as we are looking to replace positions on our cabinet, one of the things that comes up a lot here at the board table from more than one of us is that idea of planning and vision. And where are some of these ideas coming from? And I would advocate that as we are looking at onboarding our new director of finance and onboarding a new director of HR, that we think about how we are planning for the future when we are planning for staffing and budgetary questions, how that aligns with our strategic plan, and trying to bring that full picture to the board. Because I think we get a lot of the pieces of that, but I think it would be great for the administration to be able to tell the story more holistically for us and in greater detail, so that we can see that the needs we envision for our district as the successful programs expand are being accounted for in both our budget planning and our HR planning and everything else. Because I think we've succeeded because that's happening. in large part.
It is.
And it's just a question of being able to tell the story more effectively so that we at the board table can know that it's being done.
And I'm complimenting you on that because I think that you got to be not here and the continuation that goes on without you, right? Really what you're trying to build is that system that will run on in our absence. And let's say the visionary was here, well, what happens if the visionary is gone? Okay, you want that continued growth, but also the staff that we hire needs to know that we're looking forward to hearing their input and growth and like their kids were in the school, because that's the key to this. And when you go through our schools and work within those classrooms, you have, how would it be if your student was there, your child? If you treat it like it that way, you'll see what you need. And we need people that work for us to know that they're empowered from this board to come up with these, and we'll fund them. They want to build the science labs, and they came to us and said, we should renovate all these science labs, right? It shouldn't necessarily always be from the board. You're down there, boots on the ground to get that to happen. So I think we had a great meeting, so I'm good. Thank you, Roger, for allowing that to.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
all right. Okay, that concludes everything on the agenda for this evening. Our next meeting is September 11.
We're not doing a roundtable tonight. I had some items fundraising related that I'll hold at the next meeting if everybody wants to get out of here. But there's some serious issues that we need to address as a board regarding fundraising in our school district. And I'll spare everybody the time tonight, but it's on my hit list for next meeting.
Okay. Well, and maybe, I know that the fundraising committee, I mean, I don't know if there's something to report out that might dovetail with the concerns you have.
Very much.
So maybe that's a way we can kind of
Sure.
integrate it into,
Sure.
reporting out through the fundraising committee on that issue.
Yeah,
We have
yeah.
a couple other
No,
things, but yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right, this meeting is adjourned.
Here's a copy of it.
Oh, sure. Where? Is it? Yep, I'll find it.
And you're correct.
Oh, the date, right?
Yeah.